And so, yet another revelation of the hidden history of the African American fighting man, especially in Alabama. Someone go and tell Judge Moore that he might need to listen in. You know, ladies and gentlemen, during the Civil War, African Americans were pouring off the plantation. The time when America was great, according to Moore. I'll get to that in a minute. But they were pouring off of the plantation. Some close to 200,000 actually volunteered and fought for their freedom against the tyranny of the Confederacy. In Alabama, Judge Moore, there were 7,300 soldiers, Union soldiers, not to mention the many Navy seamen. There were 6 distinct African-American regiments raised in Alabama alone, along with several other regiments of mixed race and origin, between 1864 and 1866. Now, the question is why were they, or why did they? That's the question. Why was America so great then to Moore? Which brings me to this, folks. Judge Moore was asked by the lone, I guess, journalist or African American in the room, when did he think America was last great? And his answer was thusly: I think it was great at the time when families were united. Even though we had slavery, they cared for one another. Our families were strong. Our country had a direction, says Moore. Well, now, they've come back. He said this back in September. He come back and even asserted to the fact that there were reds and yellows, meaning Native Americans and Asians, and all was well. Insulting to you? No. But let me just explain this. Because it's this narrative that you will find throughout the South, or at least those individuals, even in the North, who empathize with the Southern cause. This is what they think. And it's a narrative that they, deep down inside, they know is just completely asinine. But it's one that supports their concept of themselves as being the glorious Caucasian, on the white horse, pistol-waving hero, as seen in Birth of a Nation or Gone with the Wind. So I'm explaining it. Now here is the problem. Some of you buy it. Some African Americans even buy it because you're not aware of what I just told you. 7,300 men from Alabama alone, 17,000 here in Mississippi. All you have to do is go to Africatown and know exactly what African Americans was doing in Alabama, particularly in and around Mobile. I'm just saying, folks. So, when you see this and you hear this and you hear an African American preacher talk about the fact that this guy, Roy Moore, is being crucified, the good Christian that he is, how do you look at this preacher? And I know, folks, look, let me just tell you, I know so often some of you listen to this and you sometimes come away thinking it's a history lesson. And I appreciate it. I'll give you the benefit of my knowledge, whatever it is, and what I've read and studied. But with this knowledge, you do something with it. I mean, was it Pogo that said that those who don't learn from the past are doomed to relive it? Something like that. Paraphrase. However, what you've got to do is evaluate someone who selectively thinks this. Now listen at this religious, reverent, evangelical guy who will sit in judgment of other people. Oh, so when do you think America was last great? I think it was great at the time when families were united, even though we had slavery. They cared for one another. Our families were strong, our country had a direction, which was where? And I know that you want to argue with him, but please don't waste time. What you've got to do is understand this mindset, because when you see guys running around, going up and down on the back of their Harleys or the back of their trucks with the Confederate battle flags, they think just like this. They think that all was well in America when you had because ladies and gentlemen, you realize in George in Moore's mind, Negroes, those who were enslaved, were not people; they were chattel. Based on Dred Scott decision, and so all was well. The real families were, in fact, Caucasian families, and the rest were cattle. Don't get insulted. This is how he thinks. Now, the question you've got to ask yourself, does a guy like this belong in the Senate? And who would vote for a guy like this? A guy who would say this not 40 years ago, folks. This was in September. Who would say this? Would not have actually. It came up as a result of this guy, Eric Columbus, who decided to do this little tweet. He served in the Department of Justice and Homeland Security during the Obama administration. He said, "You can't make this up. This isn't political for Rep. Daniels." I want to make that very clear. You want political? Listen to Oxy Conservative Talk Radio. That's political. They are Republican radio is what they are. And don't expect anything else besides that, folks. The only thing you're going to hear is their agenda, and they will let you know that it's their agenda. Don't expect that. Now, I'll decipher that a little bit later on. But you've got to focus on this, on the kinds of people that we're putting at the highest levels of power in this country. A guy who would say this would certainly be the kind of guy that would certainly agree with Donald John when he says that there were, let's see, you had the neo-Nazis, and what can be more antithetical to a United States than neo-Nazis, really? But they were just like the so-called Antifa, which doesn't exist. These are just the folks who were Americans, actually. Let me tell you, anti-fascism is exactly what the colonists were. The Minutemen were anti-fascist. Who was the fascist? The British. Fascism is born out of one group over the other group. In other words, it is a superior, should I say, beings. Let's put it that way. El Duce, Mussolini there in Italy had the same thing. It's the concept of royalty. The British crown, the subjects of the British crown were far more important than the colonists, for instance. That's a fascist environment. That's exactly what you had in the Confederacy. So for Donald John to say, well, okay, with neo-Nazis, these two guys were similar. Because they what? Had similar positions? No. If by chance the neo-Nazis did not show up there, you can best better believe real Americans wouldn't have shown up in the streets, and one wouldn't have been killed by way of, assassinated. You know, folks, I look at this and I ask myself, how did we get back here? Notice I said back. Because that's where we're headed. Particularly if you're an African American and you were around back in the 60s and 70s, you're seeing something that's very, very familiar. Some of this dialogue I heard, ladies and gentlemen, in the days of Paul B. Johnson. Even all the way up to Waller and Cliff Finch. And even during the days of Governor Winter. He knows it. Same kind of ideology that, okay, well, these are the kind of guys that I have on their tag, you know, had I known this, I would have picked my cotton. I picked my own cotton or something. Save your Confederate money. Put your heart in Dixie or get your ass out. You know, that. These are very popular. Judge Moore knows them all. I'm sure he has some collection of those tags. So when you hear this as an African American, and you hear a guy now who is going to be supported, and has been supported for quite some time. I mean, he was elected to the Supreme Court. Before that, you know, he meandered through prosecutor, the lower courts, all the way up to the Supreme Court. Now, so this guy obviously had some support. So when you hear this, Whitlock, and you hear a guy say this in September, that's when America was great, what do you think about it? Do you think that other people would look at this and say to themselves, really? Is this the kind of person? It has nothing to do with Democrat, Republican. It has more to do with this guy's character. This guy believes this. For him to say that.
Yeah, that's someone that doesn't really have good moral values, in my opinion. It's not a good Christian, in my opinion.
Why?
enslaving others?
Yeah.
What about that is
Well, I mean,
noble?
you do understand that the Jewish history book does, in fact, speak very soundly to those who were enslaved.
Soundly.
Yeah, it did. Didn't exactly speak against it either. Actually, in many cases, the Christianity as we know it was used actually to enslave. I mean, going back to the Pope and the whole European invasion of Africa was endorsed by the Pope, good Pope of Rome. So
For him to say that, it's not surprising, but I mean, it's wrong. It's wrong. It's nothing about it that's right, and I wouldn't want anyone representing me that feels that way. If you feel that America was great then I agree with you. It's almost as if he wants to go back to that, and that's scary. And to hear that there are black pastors all over the state of Alabama that are backing him, I mean,
speaks volumes. Huh?
Yeah.
What do you think, bro?
It's the same thing that Trump's been doing the whole time. I mean, these are dog whistles. These are codes that aren't codes. This is churning the base and reinforcing the fears and insecurities of folks who would have the like-minded idea that the bygone era was something to be praised and something to be cheered for and something to attempt to return to, which is folly. But, I mean, we see that here. That's the whole reason why we were, in the rain in the streets covering the protests in Ocean Springs earlier in the week. It's the same mentality that if we can just recapture what we had here in the South, then everything will be all right. When, not taking into account the other part of that history that you just mentioned about the African Americans enslaved who fought and won their own freedom. It's really curious to me to see how folks can justify their revisionist history, their alternative facts when it pertains to historical documents, and attempt to push forth this narrative, knowing what the outcome already was. And it's not like it's going to be any different. If anything, it's going to be a lot worse because there's a lot more access to not only information but also arms nowadays.
Well, that's what racial bigots do. Which brings me to Jackson, Mississippi. Looks like John Lewis is not going to show up. He's not going to show up because Donald John is going to be there.
Benny Thompson either.
He was unlighted. President Trump's attendance and his hurtful policies are an insult to the people portrayed in this Civil Rights Museum, says Mr. Congressman Lewis. He continues, President Trump's disparaging comments about women, the disabled, immigrants, and National Football League players disrespect the efforts of Fannie Lou Hamer, Aaron Henry, Medgar Evers, Robert Clark, James Chaney, Andrew Goodman, Michael Swarner, and countless others who've given their all for Mississippi to be a better place. So Lewis is out. But another one is going to be out, and that is the former Secretary of the Navy, one Ray Mabus. And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to read his because, let me just tell you, I was impressed with Ray. And of course, Ray is also a former governor of our great state, Mississippi. I think I have it here somewhere. Where is it? Oh, boy, I don't have it. I had it right in front of me. I apologize, ladies and gentlemen. Because you've got to hear just how eloquently he laid this. Oh, here it is. How eloquently he laid this thing out. This is former Governor Ray Mabus and the Secretary of Navy. By the way, really did a whole lot to bring a lot of jobs here to this fair state, particularly when it comes down to shipbuilding. Listen at what one former Governor Ray Mabus and Secretary of the Navy Ray Mabus says. It is with a great deal of sadness that I will not attend the opening of the Mississippi Civil Rights Museum on Saturday. This institution and event should be a celebration of the hard-won progress in civil rights. But the main speaker, Donald Trump, is actively attacking that progress and turning us back to the dark days of hatred and division. He continues, an overt racist and a supporter of white supremacists and neo-Nazis, Donald Trump represents the exact opposite of what this museum is about, honoring the heroes who fought for and often died for the idea of equality of all. Donald Trump's words and deeds now, he would not stand with, and deeds show he would not stand with the people like Medgar Evers, Fannie Lou Hamer, James Chaney, Andrew Goodman, and Michael Schwerner, and so many others. So, Ray Mavis, Caucasian,
Yep.
Mississippian, former governor. So he's not going to show up.
He's not Congressman Benny Thompson either. He commented on why he's skipping this event.
Did he?
Civil rights is about equality. We wish the people the best in the opening ceremony, but this is not the time to be a photo op for President Trump, who has no civil rights record.
You know, and I'm on the record, ladies and gentlemen, suggesting that I think that his coming is going to do more help than harm. That doesn't mean I'm going to attend, which I'm not. But I do. I think anything can draw the attention to the rest of the world that Mississippi has a museum. Too. It helps, particularly in hopes of helping to get more African Americans to relocate here, specifically, in my view, to be quite frank. That is my agenda, to get more people to move to my state, particularly African Americans, because, ladies and gentlemen, according to the 1940 census, there were more African Americans here. Not that I necessarily feel that that's a good thing or a better thing. The point is that there were people who were driven off their lands who need to come back and reacquaint themselves with the heritage of this great state of mine. There you have it. If we had planned possibly to go there and broadcast, but whether they did not permit, number one. Number two, I felt that it was, I was in more solidarity of those who would not go. Will we ultimately broadcast from the museum? I would only hope. Depends on the museum folk. I do want to go in and spend a significant amount of time looking at the artifacts of both museums. It's so pathetic even saying that. One museum covers from 1945 to 1976, and then the other, the rest of the 200 years of this fair state of mine. Go figure. But I just want to make sure that those African Americans who fought for the Mississippi to remain in the Union is very well documented, because there's so many. Many of which are buried right there in Vicksburg, close to 8,000 to be quite frank, buried there in Vicksburg, and many of you did not know it until now. All right, let's get to it here. A lot of more stuff going on. I'm gonna break down this Oxyconservative Talk Radio, this FBI stuff, and what is happening right now. First, let me just say this. I have, on good authority, been advised that right now our national security is at serious risk because our intelligence gathering abilities, particularly on the Russians, is being undermined by our very president. Now just listen to me. If you can put your Republican, conservative, liberal ideologies on the shelf, just listen to me. Just as an American, just as a citizen of this great country, noting that there are other countries who would just assume we disappear. Just as a citizen. You have a country that has shown hostility toward the United States. And we have a Central Intelligence Agency that is tasked with getting information. Intelligence is basically that. The so-called spies that we have out is to provide our government with information necessary to basically make sure we know where we are in the world, who our enemies are, and what their intent is. And we even do it with our allies, but especially with those who are hostile toward us / enemies. It is and has always been incumbent upon the CIA to track every Russian, every bit of information that they can get from the likes of Vladimir Putin, going back to Khrushchev or the czars of Russia, was extraordinarily important. Going back to Marx, Look, after World War II, ladies and gentlemen, it was no doubt that Russia, who used to maintain, you remember the Berlin Wall? There was no doubt that they were not friends of ours. So our CIA was tasked with monitoring them. Turn the clock forward. Snowden with the NSA becomes the pet boy. We hadn't heard from him. I still think he's somewhere with battery chargers on his testicles and still giving up the information. NSA, National Security Advisor, these are what they work hand in hand with Central Intelligence, basically to gather information on potential adversaries. Any and every adversary, even terrorist, utilizing whatever means necessary, right? Particularly the internet. So, he's now in the hands of Russia. Hadn't heard from him in a while. We've got a president here whose staff, before he was elected, was collaborating with the Russians. Now, even before then, before he even stopped out to run, ladies and gentlemen, he was there trying to put the Miss Universe. Well, he did have Miss Universe in Russia in 2013. But then was seeking to put Trump Tower there in Moscow, to which the Russian government said no. Every time he was there, I guarantee you the CIA was on him. Here is what I have been told. Right now, our Central Intelligence is in the dubious position of revealing their information gathering, primarily because we now have a president that they know was collaborating. They know this. They know, as Comey said, it was a coordination with a hostile government enemy to actually win the election. They know. The question is, and the problem is, by revealing outright what they know, it will show the Russians our ability to gain information. It didn't take Hillary Clinton and or Willard Mitt Romney, who I think started the little dossier, that, by the way, most of which were proven to be accurate. Didn't take that. There's been some monitoring going on, as it should be. Let me see the hands of those who feel it shouldn't be. Anytime there's interaction, look, folks, be it the Russians, be it the Palestinians, be it the Koreans, North Koreans, the Chinese. I mean, every time there is any kind of communication with those governments, or diplomats of them, or attachés, or suspected spies, there has to be monitoring. In other words, there has to be this evaluation of all the information that's being sent from them to even an American. That you expect of your government and your country. I do. Oxy-Conservative Talk Radio now is trying to convince you that should not be that way. Oh yeah, well they were outing. I mean, yeah, the CIA is not supposed to evaluate and look at Americans. Well, if you are interacting with a foreign hostile government, yes. The question is whether we're going to let this thing go to the point whereby we reveal, and it's already started to happen as I'm getting it. Already, I mean, President Barack Obama, after it was revealed and confirmed that Russia did, in fact, manipulate our election, not the election process, one could argue, but not either. You realize there's already been some testimony that, yes, the Russians did, in fact, try to get into voting machines. Now, whether they were successful has not been confirmed. One never knows till it's won. But what I'm saying to you is, when that was confirmed, President Barack Obama came on the air and he said, okay, we're going to send Russia, they're going to know that we know. And he sent what was called a digital bomb. Remember that? Something happened there in Russia, things went bumpity bump, whatever. And 4 Russians were then arrested. Do you remember this?
I do.
3 Russians were arrested because of they were for the hacking going all the way to the old Yugoslavia. Folks, I have a very good memory of this, and we keep very, very good notes on this. This is about security of my country. It's not about politics. I expect for them to evaluate not only, look, folks, there have been CIA agents, there's been FBI agents who have been prosecuted for treason, being double agents. I mean, even during the Obama administration, even during the Bush administration. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And so what we have here, ladies and gentlemen, is now our government in a position whereby Vladimir Putin sits there with a smile on his face, and the man who's in the charge knows that we know. Donald John, being the president, knows that we know. I can guarantee you that. He knows that there are individuals, be it CIA, Pompeo, all of these individuals know that there's been information here and what the collaboration was. I can tell you that. The problem is by revealing that we know and revealing the actual, how do you put this, intelligence, the tapes, whatever, by doing that, you now alert Russia to the fact that we have that kind of ability. And that, to me, can be a pretty serious thing. It is the most serious thing to Rip Daniels, way beyond politics. I think there's a lot at stake here.
Well, yeah, I mean, especially when you consider the president's conversation with Russian officials bragging on firing the FBI director, James Comey. I mean, it's really unreal to see how so many people can be so comfortable with where we are now, and I'm not really understanding how a lot of people can just be A-OK and even defend this guy. And speaking of trumpets, let's go to 2 Cents. Good morning, 2 Cents. How are you, sir?
Dun dun dun.
Dun, dun,
And
dun.
the plot thickens.
It does, doesn't it? But you
Man, aren't you tired of the Russia? There's no collusion.
There's no collusion?
They would have something would have been leaked by now. They would have done something by now.
They have done something by now. They have conducted an
Your head out
investigation.
of the sand. It's going the other way.
It's going the other way. You'd like it to go the other way, wouldn't you?
I would like to see justice.
It'd be great for you if it went the other way, because then you'd be
It'd
justified
be great for me. It'd be great
in
for
your
this country.
unyielding defense of this guy, 2 Cents. But that's not what's happening right now. What's happening right now is the FBI and the Judiciary Committee are talking because there is an investigation going on, because there's obviously something to go on to investigate, right?
Dun, dun, dun.
Okay, so it's a joke to you.
You're drumming it
It's
up.
a joke to you.
Drama.
2
Look,
Cents.
this is all deflection.
2 Cents. You're right. What is a deflection is your president coming down here to the Civil Rights Museum. That's a deflection because
That's
of the
a
week.
deflection.
Yeah, because of the week that he's had.
Stand up.
Because of the week that he's had with Flynn and his own son.
Don't submit. Man, it's all hate Trump. That's what it is. It's all hate Trump.
Why do you guys? When I say you guys, I mean you Trump supporters, you blind
Look, why?
lemmings. Why do you guys? Can I ask you? Let me ask you this. Let me ask you this. Why do you guys always go to that hate Trump?
guys.
Thing? Yeah, you guys. You,
What's that mean?
the handyman, all you guys on conservative talk crack.
I don't listen to Rush. I don't listen to.
Because you sound just like those guys, and you can't use
listen
their
to
names
y'all.
on this show. Why is it that you guys always go back to that? Oh, this is just hate Trump. This is not just hate Trump. These are based
What
on
else
his own
is it,
words.
bro? What has Congress done? Nothing. It's all.
There is an
Stand up,
investigation
don't do
into
nothing,
what's going on
obstruct.
and what happened. 2 Cents. You cannot come to grips with that, and it hurts my
Come to
feelings.
grips with what?
It hurts my feelings
The
because
Hillary
there's a lot of
Clinton
folks.
fixed the election.
That's what I'm talking about. That right there. Not
I
have no relationship with him.
coming out
I
true.
do
What
have
about
a
the
relationship
dossier?
with him.
not that, but Hillary Clinton.
Oh,
right?
not that.
Not the fact that your own president admitted to this relationship,
Not
but
the fact
something
the
else with Hillary
FBI
Clinton.
may have paid for this dossier.
Where did you
And
get
there's somebody
that? Where
on
did you get that? Where did you
somebody
get
on
that?
this investigation by Mueller may have been the person that took it to the FBI.
Not the fact of what the dossier uncovered, not the information that the president himself has not
You know what?
disputed.
It's been that dossier has been disclaimed. You say most of it's true. Most of it is true.
No, it is not. If it were, then why
spell his name
was
right?
the FBI being questioned about it if it was proven disclaimed? Why is it even a point of contention? If it was proven disclaimed, it wouldn't be. But that's the point. That
They've
is
got
your
nothing
false
on Trump.
narrative. If they had nothing,
Trump.
there'd be no investigation. And I just hope that you and yours can.
No, there's going to be plenty of investigations.
There's going to be plenty of investigation because this won't end. Because the relationship is still there. It's solvent. There's going to be plenty of investigation because Donald Trump Jr. had meetings with Russian officials. Michael Flynn had meetings with Russian officials at the direction of the president. Your head is in the sand, not ours. We're trying to pull you up out because the tide may be rolling in, and if your head's still in the sand, you are in a very dubious position.
Let me tell you, folks, it's become more than apparent that there is a desire to indoctrinate you good God-fearing Americans based upon an ideology rather than based upon national security. That is not coming out of the mouths of conservatives. And let me just tell you, that is fundamental for being a so-called conservative. This is about national security. At some point, you're going to have to come to grips with that. Got to come to grips with that. We'll be back.
It's about that time to get away. Make your reservations, pack your bags, and head on down to the coast, the Almanac Hotel and Bistro. Live music, entertainment, special events, and delicious, mouth-watering Cajun Creole with the Almanac Hotel and Bistro. Celebrate with special events, wedding receptions,
Get that feud
rehearsal
yourself.
dinners, banquets, family reunions, office parties,